All right, welcome back. Today I want to go over another one of Nancy McWilliams' books. This is Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy. And I'm so excited to get back into another McWilliams book and to discuss it with you all today. One of my favorite things about reading Nancy McWilliams is that the way she writes is very honest, it's very humanistic, and it feels very one-on-one. It feels like you are getting mentorship directly from her because she's giving you a lot of detail. It's in enough depth that it is engaging and it makes you think and you feel like you're learning new things, but she speaks to you almost as, I might say, a friend, or at least maybe a better word would be a colleague. She speaks to you as a colleague, and so you feel like you're there having this conversation with her, learning more descriptive things from her just overall, and you're learning from her experience as well. She writes with a warmth, depth, and appreciation for the complexity of human experience. So this book, like her other books, doesn't just provide explicit answers to distinct questions, but it teaches you in a way how to think and reflect and grow alongside your patients. So this book, Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, reminds us that the practice of psychotherapy is not simply a theoretical framework or just being entrenched in all of these technical details of analysis, but it is more of a relational approach. It's very practical in its approach to helping someone to better understand themselves and to better understand how to operate within the world. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to walk you through all of the detail that the book covers, give you some examples, some of my favorite quotes, and in the end, I'll leave you with my recommendation that you read the book in its entirety for yourself. So, chapter 1 starts off with the background and the definition of psychotherapy, what it really means, what it is. The book begins by situating psychoanalytic psychotherapy within a broader cultural context. And she emphasizes in that first chapter that this approach is not just about reducing symptoms, but rather it's really about engaging at a deep level with the person in front of you and engaging with their innermost thoughts and their way of relating to others and to the world. She cites Freud quite early on with a quote that I really enjoyed and that I take to heart. And she quotes him saying, "The ideal preparation for doing psychoanalysis is the broadest possible grounding in history, literature, the social sciences, psychology, and the humanities, plus a personal analysis." This quote encapsulates the idea that the well-trained psychoanalyst is not only well-versed in the therapeutic techniques, but versed more broadly overall in world history, the arts, philosophy, all of these things. She also emphasizes that this is not a rigid formula, as many people tend to think that it is. It's not something that you learn a very descriptive and specific technique and adhere to it wholeheartedly no matter the circumstances, but rather this is a very one-on-one sort of process that has to demand that you can tolerate some level of ambiguity as you work through this with another person's psyche. Moving on with chapters 3 and 4, we get into discussion of preparing the therapist as well as preparing the patient. For the therapist, this includes understanding all of the various psychoanalytic orientations as well as your own psyche, understanding the self. She emphasizes the importance of cultivating self-awareness and emphasizes that therapy is as much about the ongoing development of the therapist as it is about guiding the patient through their struggles. Now, as for preparing the patient, this revolves around developing enough rapport with the patient so that they are able and feel comfortable enough to, in a very honest way, engage in the process. They must have both a willingness and the capacity to engage with their inner world. And this process demands, in order for it to be successful, it demands honesty and the capacity for reflection. And she really does an apt job of driving home this essential point that therapy depends on the ability for both the therapist and the patient to be completely honest with what they are thinking and feeling, what their desires, their goals, their drives are. She writes on the topic of being oneself Artificiality and posturing have no place in analytic therapy, mainly because they are discordant with the effort to foster an unflinching emotional honesty. Chapters 5 through 7 dig more into this idea of boundaries. What are appropriate boundaries, and how should you go about setting those boundaries? What good do they do for the overall therapeutic process? All of these sorts of very practical questions. And along the way, she also explains more about the actual therapeutic process and what one may come to expect. So again, a core theme by this point in the book is this emphasis on establishing boundaries and maintaining them, even if in the short term it causes discomfort to the patient. McWilliams writes, "In this therapy, one is required to cooperate in certain ways, but one does not have to pretend to like cooperating. Actions and feelings are separate things. Some actions may be unacceptable, but no feeling is beyond the pale. This captures the delicate balance of holding the therapeutic frame firmly while still validating the patient's inner experience." So in this way, you come to further understand that maintaining boundaries, even if it causes the patient discomfort, gives you more fodder to work with within the therapeutic setting. And maintaining a consistent frame in this context provides you both with a safe environment to explore all of these different dynamics that exist within the patient's inner world. And without that frame, without the safety of holding that frame, things could and will in fact get far too messy in order to go about the work that you are trying to achieve. She also describes how important it is to model the ability to set and maintain boundaries for many patients who have not yet in their lives seen this modeled successfully before. And they may even test you and try to push the outer limits of the boundaries to see if they can in fact trust you to provide a good example of a safe environment for them to be honest, or if you are going to let your boundaries collapse like so many others in their lives and not distinguish yourself as someone separate from their peers. Then we get into chapters 8 and 9, which provide these two distinct long-term case studies. And I really enjoyed this part of the book. One, you learn so much from observing what has actually taken place in the course of therapy, and we're talking over years. It reminds me of another book that I've covered on this channel. It's Alexander Chris's book. I believe it was simply titled Borderline, where he in great depth describes essentially a case example of working with a borderline patient over the course of many years. And Nancy McWilliams does this over the course of the 2 chapters, each regarding a different patient. And she chooses these patients carefully. The first is that with a more neurotic orientation, and the second is that of one with a more borderline to psychotic orientation. And so you get to see how you may go about interacting with and trying to treat patients with these different levels of defenses, essentially. So again, not only are you learning by way of example all of these technical aspects of therapy, but the narratives themselves and watching these patients' lives unfold through her storytelling is genuinely entertaining, just from the standpoint of reading a book in general. The narratives that unfold in these patients' lives are entertaining, and it reminds me of how grateful I am to have the job that I have, where I get to see such a breadth of human experience. I get to see so much suffering, but I also get to see so much triumph, and I get to see it not just in my life as I would had I not taken this career path, but I get to see it through the lens of so many other lives as well. And that is something that I'll always be so grateful for. And Nancy McWilliams in this book has an emphasis on that as well. And she talks about that specifically. And then in her own way, she wraps up the book with chapters 11 and 12, talking about challenges you'll likely face as a therapist and the importance of self-care so that you can continue to care for others. These aspects are often overlooked in other books that are focused more just on the technical sphere of what it means to be a therapist and how to do the duties of your job. McWilliams, as I said in the beginning of the video, takes this approach that feels very much like she is your mentor, and she wants you to understand these technical details, but she also wants you to have and live a successful successful and fulfilling life overall, even outside of the consulting room. So she spends this time here to tell you about challenges you'll likely face. These challenges may involve burnout, disillusionment, countertransference struggles, things you may not be anticipating, but by reading this book and by learning from her, you may be able to see these things on the horizon before you find yourself all bound up within them, and you may be able to take her advice and either steer clear of falling into these traps or to manage them whenever you find yourself trying to deal with these sorts of situations. She really wants you to maintain both efficacy and emotional resilience. And so finally in chapter 12 at the end of the book, she has this characteristic blend of humor and depth with a bit of a Freudian twist where she tells you in detail how she believes you can best take care of yourself from the context of the id, the ego, and the superego. So she goes through each in turn and tells you how important it is that you take care of yourself so that you can literally live a long and fulfilling life and be there for a greater amount of time for the patients that you have committed to helping along the way in their lives. She talks at great length about how it is such a commitment to say that you are going to enter into long-term therapy with a patient, that you are agreeing to be there for them through their ups and downs. And a big part of that is maintaining your own health along the way. So again, this book is technical, yes, but it's also so deeply practical. And I just genuinely enjoy reading her work. It is not a slog to get through. It's something that I actually look forward to. And I find myself turning the pages often with a smile on my face as she makes little subtle jokes here and there, and she just feels like she's in the room with you. I think ultimately it speaks to her skill as an author. She's providing information that a lot of it you can find elsewhere, but it's the way that she presents it. She presents it in a very honest way. She is willing to tackle subjects and questions that there aren't clear answers for, and in so doing, she shows you by way of example what it really means to be okay with ambiguity. And she has this emphasis on what it's actually going to be like day to day. And she wants you to be aware of all of the ups and downs, the challenges. She wants to anticipate where you may find yourself in a literal sense in terms of running your business, but also in an emotional sense in terms of what you may be thinking or feeling as you start, as you're halfway through your career, as you're reaching the end of your career, all these different aspects of your life as a professional. She wants to be there for you and provide you with advice. And it's because of this that I truly enjoy her work. So that is Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy by Nancy McWilliams. I have a video already on psychoanalytic diagnosis by McWilliams as well. This book was such an eye-opener for me on how to formulate patients. And speaking of that, I'll be looking forward to reading another book by her, and that is going to be Case Formulation. So you can look forward to that in the future. I hope that you take the time to check out this book or this book, and I hope to hear your thoughts on Nancy McWilliams in the comments down below. So with that said, as always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. Always happy to hear your thoughts or your questions, and I'll see you in the next one.